This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to a Friday edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Hopefully this gets out to you in time for your Friday commute. Sorry for the delay. Just was one of those weeks around here with a lot going on, and we are hoping to get you through your weekend with an On the Pony Express podcast. Look, SMU basketball got a tough, gritty win earlier this week at Cal for those of us who stayed up late for that. Big game against Stanford on Saturday. We'll talk about that. But we're going to talk about the big questions around spring football and if SMU should even have a spring football game. That's going to be the meat of this podcast. So tune in, sit back, and enjoy. But before we get into it, do want to remind you guys that we are presented by the Thomas Auto Group. Head up 75, go to any of their 3 dealerships, Ford, Subaru, Volkswagen, and learn about the Thomas Promise. And get employee pricing when you mention On the Pony Express for new and pre-owned vehicles.
At Thomas Auto Group, the Thomas Promise includes the low price promise,
the pre-owned promise,
and the 72-hour exchange promise.
And finally, the 100% customer satisfaction promise. So shop Thomas Auto Group today, home of the Thomas Promise.
Yeah, Brandon Thomas, his entire family, SMU owned there, so make sure you support the Thomas Auto Group and check them out and go to thomasautogroup.com and look at their selection of vehicles. All right, let's lead off a little bit with basketball here. SMU does take on Stanford on Saturday. The Pony Hoops Insight podcast is supposed to be recording today, so they'll kind of break down the latest and greatest there with the Mustangs getting what was a difficult win out of the way, 81-77 at Cal on Wednesday night. For those of you who stayed up for that 10 p.m. Central Time tip-off, and for those of you who stayed up for the 11 p.m. Eastern Time tip-off for that one, kudos to you. It was a game that ended, I believe, around 12:20 a.m. for us in the Central Time Zone. But SMU improves now to 21-7 overall with that win, 12-5 in the ACC. I mean, truthfully, that is something that you would have taken all day, every day, twice on Sunday. Just nobody probably preseason would have predicted it would have 0 quad 1 wins. If that was the record for SMU, you would have figured there was a bad loss in there. You would have figured there was an upset in there. But no, nothing like that so far for SMU. They improved to 7-1 on the road in the ACC. That's 6 straight victories away from home. They look to keep it going on Saturday at Stanford, who sits at 18-10, 10-7 overall. 4 p.m. Central Time game on ACC Network. Now, SMU still without Boopie Miller. And for those of you who are on theponyexpress.com, which I encourage you to join us there for $1 for just your first week, you knew that Boopie Miller was out for the Cal game before anyone. And you also know that he is not on the road trip. So he is recovering in Dallas. He is going to try and get as healthy as he can. And that was kind of the decision that was made. It was, they keep trying to get him out there and test it out a little bit, but just not worth it. And SMU at this point, the committee knows they're without Boopie Miller. They know that they didn't have him for Wake Forest. They didn't have him for Clemson. That obviously played a factor. So we'll see how that is viewed later on in the whole process whenever it comes to tournament time. If SMU can get through the rest of the regular season unscathed, then maybe make something happen in the ACC tournament. We'll see how the committee talks about that. But with SMU, they're not going to have Boopie Miller against Stanford, which is, a big deal. And we saw with the turnovers Wednesday night what that meant for SMU's offense. We saw that they just at times when the foul trouble hit with Chuck Harris early, when Tibet Gorner had 2 fouls, he was back after a bout with the flu. SMU couldn't go to Boopie Miller. He wasn't there. BJ Edwards had to play. He ended up playing 39 minutes. Incredible. He had some bad turnovers. You can credit those in part to him being tired, but they've got to find a way to clean it up a little bit more. I thought Cal, for being a team that is battling to even make the ACC tournament, I thought they had a lot of jump in their legs. I thought they brought it overall from a just effort standpoint. And I didn't think SMU, it wasn't that SMU's effort was poor. I mean, shoot, they jumped out to like a 22-6 lead. It was a hot start for SMU. Cal called timeout pretty early because the Mustangs jumped all over. Chuck Harris got hot early, and then, the team made a lot of plays down the stretch. BJ Edwards had a steal and a dunk. That was great. Cario Oquendo played some really strong defense. They were able to get him to 10 points. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in double figures. So you think about if you added Boopy Miller into that fold, maybe they keep it rolling with the 6 players in double figures overall. But, this is a game where you're going to see, at some point you're going to see those tough games. Not every bottom feeder is going to get treated like SMU treated Miami down in Coral Gables. That's just not going to happen. You're going to see games like the one in Charlottesville where they needed Boopy Miller and those multiple 3-pointers down the stretch to literally steal a game. You're going to see some of those difficult battles. And Cal has one of the best freshmen in the country in Wilkinson, and he, had his moments where he showed that flash, but otherwise they were, for the most part, able to, contain Andrei Stojakovic and keep him really quiet until really the second half. So it wasn't a bad win by any means. I mean, even though Cal is not somebody who's very good at all overall, it's kind of weird. You take out the turnovers, you take out those second chance points, and it looks, quite frankly, like the Miami game. But turnovers are a part of it. SMU has to clean them up before a big game against Stanford, just overall. And now SMU sitting alone in 4th place in the ACC. They are right back in control of their own destiny when it comes to that double bye. So kudos to SMU. You go on the road. It's tough to do. Now they are staying out there for the duration, which you would kind of expect. That's how SMU would do it instead of flying back and forth. So they'll maybe be settled in. They'll, you hope the start is the same thing that you saw against Cal, against Stanford. So this will be an interesting matchup as well for SMU on Saturday. A much better opponent and a team that SMU took care of business against, just like how at home earlier this season as well. Last time out, SMU won 85-61, a dominant performance against Maxine Renaud. So this time around, Stanford's going to look to bring it a little bit and have a better showing. So we'll be watching that one, 4 p.m. Central, ACC Network on Saturday. And then next week, SMU wraps up its home schedule with Syracuse and then faces a road test against Florida State. So we'll be watching. We'll have your coverage. And all the more reason why to subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com. Just join us on the message board, hang out, talk about the game, do all those things. So looking forward to that. Before we get into these spring football questions, do want to introduce a new sponsor to the On the Pony Express family. And this one is really, really cool because we're getting a former player involved. And it has a unique backstory because Michelle and I live in Plano, and Jack, of course, and one of our final going out meals before Jack was born ended up being Mignon, which if you are in the Plano area or if you're in Frisco or if you're maybe in Richardson or North Dallas or where have you, this is one of the staples since the early 2000s when this French steakhouse and restaurant opened right at Preston Road in Lorimar. And they've been there on the waterfront with the beautiful patio and the great bar, serving up some French classics, whether it be steak au poivre, creme brulee, seafood crepe. They really have some unique takes. And this is a beautiful restaurant. Nick Natour and his family, it is still family owned. Nick, the owner, is there 7 days a week, checks on every table. It's a romantic date night type of place to a corporate event, private parties. They hold wedding receptions, and they've had some out there on the beautiful patio overlooking the water, which is really, really nice. We had one of our last meals before Jack was on Valentine's Day, and it was still unbelievable with that fixed menu on that day. But absolutely love Mignon. They have a great bar. They're open for dinner every night. They also do brunch on Sundays, which is great. So you see, if you're watching on YouTube, some of the meals and the ambiance that you get there. Again, 2 private dining rooms. So you can book corporate events. You can book private parties as well. It's just fantastic. So really, really excited about Mignon. So head up there. It's on Preston Road. You can't really miss it. Nick Natur, the younger Nick, was a teammate of Hayden Howerton. So we're going to have him on the pod as well and get him going a little bit with that. So looking forward to having Nick on. We connected a while ago, actually at that night when Michelle and I went to Mignon for Valentine's Day about a year ago now. And we've been kind of talking here and there. We've seen a little bit more of each other. And of course, with us living in Plano, we've been over there quite a few times and just enjoyed it. It's a beautiful place to have dinner and or brunch. So make sure you check them out. Mignon, they're going to be doing a lot with us, and really, really appreciate them for joining us On the Pony Express. And again, just check them out. Mignon, Mignon, if you want to Google that. But they're a great family-owned restaurant and got plenty of SMU ties. So before we wanted to get into the biggest questions of spring ball, wanted to shout them out. So thank you, Mignon. All right, now we get into spring football. And this is going to be quite the spring because once again, SMU faces a lot of questions, a lot of new faces into this program. One of the best transfer portal halls in the country is now on campus, and SMU is returning its star quarterback, Kevin Jennings, of course, but they also have a lot of questions on that offense and how to take it to that next level in year 2 with Preston being the starter. And that's something that Rhett Lashley and his staff are going to have to answer. And those are the kind of overarching themes of spring ball. A lot of the new faces on defense, a lot of the returning talent is stepping into bigger roles rather than maybe proven stars in a sense. You have a few of those type of players, but a lot of the returning talent is looking to create their own stardom. They're looking to create that next Elijah Roberts. They're looking to create that next Jonathan McGill. They're going to try and be, the next SMU receiver to go to the NFL. There's a hole in the running back room with Brashard Smith not there. There are a lot of things on this roster that have to be answered, and it starts with spring ball. And spring practice is I would say under fire right now in a sense. You have spring games that are being canceled and whether it be Texas or I don't think Nebraska did it. Maybe they did. Ole Miss holds they don't even hold a spring game. It's more of a 7-on-7 Grove Bowl games is what they call it. But Nebraska called off the spring game actually, and Ohio State called off the spring game. And all of that is around tampering and more film out there and things like that. But look, SMU spring ball starts March 25th from what I've been told. So we will get a later look at the Mustangs as well, which is actually interesting because last year SMU ended its season right around New Year's in the Fenway Bowl, I think, if I have that right. And SMU, went up there right after Christmas, I think. And so they actually ended up going later than this year. But now there's a longer layoff for SMU than it had compared to spring ball last year. And they will run all the way until the end of April. Now, what a spring final game looks like, that will be something to keep an eye on. I'm sure there'll be a formal announcement at some point, whether it be a fan fest, whether it be an open practice or something. But I would say, Rhett Lashley and his staff, they haven't necessarily done a whole to-do. It's been at Highlander Stadium in the past. When the new end zone complex was being built. So that's something to watch is should SMU hold a spring game. But I will talk about that in a bit. Let's jump into the players, and let's jump into the position by position biggest questions that I have for SMU spring football. Quarterbacks. Look, Kevin Jennings is back, and he is sitting there on Heisman Trophy watch lists and getting odds at that prestigious trophy. But, that's not the only quarterback on the roster. And truth be told, while spring football is a great tool of developing your players just as a whole, you aren't going to find out who Kevin Jennings is in terms of improving his ball security until the fall, because that's the type of player Kevin Jennings is. And that's the type of player that SMU needs him to continue to try to be, is one that takes care of the football at critical moments in particular. There's a time and place for risk-taking, and we can break down all of that with Kevin Jennings. But that is a question for the fall that is going to be answered. The actual games is, does Kevin Jennings take care of the football a little bit better in critical situations, in particular against top-flight opponents? That'll be answered in the games. But the way practices, and this is around college football, until the bullets get flying, you don't know how guys are going to necessarily take care of the football in a way. There are some players that it's very clear they can take care of the football, they can manage it well, all of those things. This is just not one of those situations. But you want to see that improved by Kevin Jennings. The biggest question, though, that I have is, how big of a step forward does Keldrick Luster take? And here's why. Tyler Van Dyke into the quarterback room. Immediately, some national media talked about, oh, wow, they're bringing him in. He's going to come in and compete and do all those things. Well, he's not ready yet. And that's the reality of it for Tyler. He's a great veteran that got added to the room. It's a big deal that he is here, I think, just as an overall, improvement for that position in a sense, with Preston Stone moving on. But now that's something that you're not going to see. I don't think we're going to see much of Tyler Van Dyke. I could be totally off. But what we will see a lot of is Keldrick Luster, because you do have Preston Stone that's moving on. You do have Tyler Aronson and Ty Hawkins back, but SMU has been pretty adamant that you are going to see a guy like Keldrick Luster be the backup long term. And Ty Hawkins comes in with a bunch of fanfare and all of those things, and that has to impact, Tyler and Keldrick, as they, Tyler Aronson and Keldrick Luster as they get spring ball underway. But at the end of the day, you need to find out what you have in Keldrick Luster, and that means give him more reps. So Kevin Jennings has the benefit of being the starter, being the guy. Second straight spring, he's going to get most of the snaps. But Keldrick Luster now, it's got to be that next step for him. And I am excited to see a lot more of Keldrick Luster in the spring this year. Because last year he was just kind of coming off of, I guess, was it? He enrolled early, right? Maybe? Might have had that right or wrong. But he was here in spring last year. So now he enters his third year into the program. I want to see that next step, because you saw it in a little bit of what he could do at the end of the Penn State game. I want to see Keldrick Luster take that next step. I want to start the buzz about Keldrick Luster in terms of who he is and what he can bring to the table, because there are a lot of people that are high on Keldrick Luster. And look, guess what? There's no quarterback competition this offseason. I'm not going to sit here and tell you there is, because there's not. There's a general day-to-day competition at every single position. But at the quarterback position, unless Kevin Jennings totally wets the bed completely and falls off and does all of those things in the fall, there's nothing to talk about here. Last year, Kevin Jennings showed what he can do in games, and he had started to show that already. And there was pressure. There was pressure on Preston Stone to produce. There's not pressure on Kevin Jennings from the outside like there is and was last year, with Kevin Jennings nipping at his heels in his development and what SMU kind of thought that they had in him. That's the nice thing for Keldrick. There's no pressure. You just have to continue to work and get better. My biggest question is, how big of a jump do we see him take now that he is in his third year with the program? That's a big question, because it's going to impact then how they handle guys like Tyler Aronson and Ty Hawkins with the quarterback position. So there's generally not too much to talk about with the quarterbacks, but sure felt like I was rambling there. There is a lot to talk about with the running back position. The biggest question for the running backs is who takes the lead? Who takes the early lead in this race to be the starting running back, to be the main guy? And it could be a position that is a little bit more by committee this year, but that's not what it needs to be. Look, I'm starting to become a little bit of a believer that if you don't have a clear-cut starting running back, it's kind of like quarterbacks. If you don't have a clear-cut starting running back, do you have a starting running back? And there are select examples. There can be you've seen some of the great backfields. Ohio State had Judkins and Travion Henderson, and you had, the days of Alabama of old where you had Mark Ingram and you had Eddie Lacy and Trent Richardson. And every time that they had that, you knew that there was a one, and then there was a next option that was coming up and going to be the guy. And there are schools across the country that have that too. But those are kind of the things that you knew you had somebody great. Well, right now for SMU, they don't know what they have. And part of that is you've got an opportunity to really see SMU put together a backfield that has a combination of explosiveness, power, and all of those things. This is a really, really interesting position group. So who takes the early lead? Who can grab onto that momentum early and put themselves in position to start? Brashard Smith is somebody that got on campus and immediately it was known that he was going to have a real good chance to be one of the top just producers on this team. I mean, you never know until the lights come on type of thing. Like SMU found out quickly with the offensive line that when the lights came on, it wasn't good. But when the lights came on for Brashard Smith at Nevada, holy cow, they knew right away that they had something going. And they felt validated with that. Right now, you don't necessarily know what you have at the running back room. And you have Chris Johnson Jr., who's on campus. You have Derek McFall, who returns after redshirting last year. You have Jermico Green, who arrives this summer, which is fine. There's a lot of confidence he's going to be a good one. But then you have LJ Johnson, who's a complete veteran, kind of grinder, thunder, needs to be that next, he needs to be that guy who stays healthy, because that would really help this running back room just from a depth perspective. And then you have Jalen Knighton and Kamar Wheaton and Zane Miners, who are recovering from injuries. So with that being the case, you need a Chris Johnson Jr., you need a Derek McFall, you need an LJ Johnson to be a dude this spring. Whoever it is, you need that to happen. And you need to find out really quickly what you have, because the spring portal window is going to be here before we know it. And it's going to be something that for SMU, I mean, if you really don't like what you have, could you go out and find another running back? Sure. That's why they tried to sign a running back late. They didn't find one that ended up working out for them. And they go into spring now watching this room really closely and seeing what they have. This is the position that if there's a sleeper position for what they could add in the portal in the spring, this would probably be it if they can find the right guy at the right price, because they don't want to necessarily invest. They've invested a lot in the offensive line. They've invested a lot in the quarterback position. They have a strong wide receiver room that they feel like they have options that are unproven, which we'll talk about in a bit. But at running back, the biggest question is, can you get somebody who becomes the lead early? Does Chris Johnson look like he's hitting early on? Does a Derek McFall look like after a nice spring workouts that he can be that guy? Because I think Derek McFall can be that guy. Chris Johnson, I have a few more questions than I did about Brashard Smith. I thought Brashard's vision, I thought his lateral ability, I thought all those, obviously straight line speed and explosiveness showed up on tape. But Chris Johnson looks like more of a one-cut speedy back, like elite speed. Don't get me wrong. It'll be interesting to see how he looks running the football, and in a spring practice, in a practice environment that I hope that SMU is pretty physical with. Like, if you're not going to have a spring game, get after it, roll the ball out there, get better, all those things, which SMU does. But I said this kind of at times with SMU in the past, and this is a college football thing in general right now, guys are trying to take care of their rosters. And the days of really, really scrimmaging and hitting, just doesn't happen as much. And you're worried about getting hurt. SMU's developed a fairly good culture of taking care of each other. But I will say, I think, and we talked about this before last season, so take it for what it is. But before they had an absolute game breaker in Brashard Smith, the run game hadn't hit since Xavier Jones. And I still think there is that line to push a little bit in terms of running the football in practice, and having guys hit and get kind of that development and things like that. So it's a tough line to walk, but overall, the running back room, who steps up? I know you could say that about every position, but that's as blunt and as straightforward as it needs to be for that group, because it's a really important position to make that happen. At wide receiver, the biggest question for me is which true freshman will prove themselves or not prove themselves? Because this is a group that has returning receivers like Romello Brinson and Jordan Hudson that have played a lot. It doesn't have Link Rhodes, the junior college edition, yet on campus. He arrives this summer. Randy Reese is an intriguing slot receiver. Jackson Lavender is an intriguing slot receiver. You have some options at these positions that you would like to see them take the next step. Jamarian Carroll, wherever they play him. There are others that SMU football needs them to figure out how to take it to the next level, because that's what eventually you have to have. And in 2025, you have Ashton Kozart, who's back. Then you have a group of receivers, and you have a group of players that just overall need to step up. But the biggest question I have is which freshman receiver looks like he's that guy. Because if you get that guy out of spring ball and you get a true freshman that looks like they're going to be an instant contributor, that is massive. And I'm of the belief that you can generally learn pretty quickly who's got it, who doesn't. And I know that sounds maybe tunnel vision. I know that sounds maybe harsh, but like I was among the people that pushed really hard for Jamarian Carroll to finish as a 4-star on 3. He did. He, as of now, hasn't broken through. He spent his first year putting on weight. He did that, put on some mass. He's battled some injuries. This is the year now that I got to see Jamarian Carroll do something. And kind of early on when he was on campus, it kind of looked like to me, I was like, ooh, I don't know what I'm seeing here that I saw differently than when he was coming out of high school, when I went and saw him and he was explosive and had a huge game. But there are some things that he's missing right now and that have to be developed quickly or else it's not going to work. It's not going to pan out. And I said when they added Ashton Kozart that I was like, man, didn't see the field at all for Oregon in his first year. It was kind of a red flag for me. At least Jamarian Carroll saw some time. So you now look at that position and very rarely, I guess, in my years of doing this, I've seen DJ Chark emerge late in his career at LSU. That's happened. But Jamar Chase, Terrace Marshall, guys like that, I know those are freakazoids that I'm talking about, but you see something in players at that position generally early on that makes you say, okay, that's a really good player. Randy Reese is unique because he ended up getting hurt as a senior, but he made some plays. And then gray shirted, so SMU completely didn't, have him. And then there was a log jam of Jake Bailey and Roderick Daniels and guys like that at the slot position. But there was a lot of people that kind of said, look, he's got some explosiveness. He really looks the part in terms of that. So this is the year for a lot of those guys. It's kind of put up or shut up. But the most important thing for me is to find out these 2 freshmen early enrollees, are they going to be able to do it? Are they going to be able to win one-on-one with a Deuce Harmon at times? Are they going to be able to win one-on-one with a Marcellus Barnes? Are they going to take it to a guy like Jalen Davis-Robinson? Are they going to take it to a guy like A.J. Davis who's been around? Are they going to take advantage of some of these veteran corners and make them look foolish at times and just show flashes? Because if you get flashes out of these two, that makes you feel a lot better. And that makes you feel like you have something in those receivers because they have the technical skills, I think, both of them. And we know Dalen Singleton has the speed. And it looks like Jalen Cooper has some of the speed and tools. He's not that big. Neither one of them are, truthfully. They'll take some time to add mass. But you can tell if their understanding of the college game is there fairly quickly. And there's a moment of it's swimming and they're adjusting and they're learning and all of those things. And they won't always make the right play. They won't always do that. They will have some things they have to clean up. But if SMU is going to play these guys, and like Rhett Lashley said at National Sign Day, if they're going to play those guys and figure it out, then this is the early going that they need to show it. And they've got to prove it. And they've got to show those flashes. And once they show those flashes, then you can throw them out there. That's why Rashee Rice played as a true freshman. He showed flashes in a loaded wide receiver room. So everybody remembers those days of the Chad Morris signings. And it was kind of, and those were times when, like Joshua Shellmeyer, like, bless his heart, like you could tell right away it just wasn't going to work out. So those are some of my early experiences with that. But this is an opportunity for everybody to have a clean slate with a lot of veterans out the door. This is your chance after being in the program to change that kind of thought on what you are going to be or not be in this program. It's a huge opportunity for the receivers in general. It's the biggest opportunity right now for those two true freshmen, Dalen Singleton and Jalen Cooper, 2 4-stars, to step up right away because SMU needs them. At the tight end position, it is a very different conversation. It is a lot more fun for the most part to talk about the tight ends, even though RJ Maryland will probably be severely limited and or just kept in a complete bubble outfit during spring ball because he is that dude when he is healthy. That is something SMU absolutely needs, is him to be healthy. So they'll probably just sit him out. And he's still recovering. I haven't seen him in crutches when I've seen him on campus, but I expect him to be in the right direction as far as, overall getting ready for fall camp and be fully cleared and hopefully ready to go in time for the season. And then you have Matthew Hibner, who is, a veteran. He is a experienced player. He has shown that he can be that guy for SMU. And so the question I have at this position is let's see what the younger talent looks like. Let's see what SMU has as a whole behind Matthew Hibner, behind RJ Maryland, because it's a position group that will return Stone Evie from what I understand. But then you have Trip Reardon, Adam Moore, and then Devin Martin arrives this summer, as does Miles Uter. So Trip Reardon, Adam Moore, this is your time. This is your opportunity to say, don't forget about me. Let's run some, what would it be? 3 tight end sets. Let's get it going. Let's add some physicality. This is your moment to really show what you got. Because if I'm SMU, I'm being real careful with RJ Maryland, obviously, but especially Matthew Hibner. So it's pretty simple. What do you have behind those guys in Trip Reardon and Adam Moore? Those are the 2 that I'm watching closely. Before we get into the offensive line, which could be another lengthy conversation here on this biggest questions of spring ball for SMU, do want to remind you guys that we are presented by Northwest Insurance Agency. Give Mark Villasana a shout. You can talk about your current rates, coverage, all those things. Give him a call, 214-352-5656, or email him, markv@nwagencies.com, and he will take a look at your current policy and make sure that you're covered.
Hi, I'm Mark Villasana, proud SMU alumni and agency principal of Northwest Insurance Agency. Give me a call if you'd like to discuss your insurance or if you just want to discuss SMU football. My phone number is 214-352-5656, or you can email me at info@nwagencies.com. Pony up.
Mark Villasana loves him some SMU football. He'll also be in Moody, of course, cheering on the Mustangs for that senior night game against Syracuse on Tuesday. So appreciate his support of the On the Pony Express podcast, everything we do here, presented by Northwest Insurance Agency, Thomas Auto Group, Status Jet, big supporters of the podcast, so appreciate them. As we look at the offensive line, this is an intriguing position for me. And if you look at what SMU has back, you'd say, okay, Logan Parr locked in left guard. Most likely, I don't think they're going to mess with him too much there. Great. Addison Nichols locked in. You're starting center right there. Right guard, now this is where you have a little bit of a competition. Do you have Savion Byrd? Do you have PJ Williams? Do you have Alex Woods? Do you have Josh Bates? Do you have someone else, King Large, that steps up there? Do you have Graham Uter? Does he play some guard a little bit? A lot of questions along this offensive line, but I think what I want to see the most is the progression of the offensive tackles. And look, Savion Byrd played his absolute tail off against Clemson. And part of the reason why SMU was able to come back was because he improved in the second half. The Penn State game was a perfect storm of playing. I mean, the guy's going to be the number one pick potentially, Abdul Carter, with a stress fracture in his foot. He's going to have surgery. So he's not even going to do anything, it sounds like, combine and pro day. So you've got that guy who is that good as a pass rusher. And Savion Byrd, he battled his tail off, and when you get behind like that, you got to pass. Of course he's going to tee off on you. And he teed off on everybody all year long. That's no shame in that, so to speak. I mean, everybody watches that Penn State game and, they think that's the first time Abdul Carter was, a great football player. And he showed over the course of his final few games for the Nittany Lions, I mean, just how good he really is. I mean, he was a top 10 pick before that, but now he's going to be the number one pick potentially. So, look, Savion Byrd, he played as best he could at left tackle in terms of pass protection against some really tremendous defensive ends. I mean, Donovan Ezra, who's a freakazoid, was out there at the combine this week and was among the top guys in terms of 40s and things like that. I mean, played pretty well against him, and he's a first-round type of talent. Then you have PJ Williams on the right side, and then you have Andrew Chamblee, who's back, and hopefully if you're SMU, he's healthy for the entire offseason, and you get him into that competition, you see how it goes. And then you have the wild card Zion Nelson, who they bring in from Miami. You have Caleb Johnson, who's going to be back this spring as well. There was kind of some questions since he walked, but he's going to be back. And then you welcome a top 100 prospect in Jamad Odoms this summer. But for spring ball, this is a good opportunity to assess what you have at the offensive tackle position. And if you can start to figure this out, and the good thing for SMU is, look, they do have East Texas A&M to start things off that, is what it is. But then you play Baylor. So you don't have a game against a Nevada team that has a really good staff, that has a really good group that is able to, put together, game plans. I mean, they should get a general warm-up game at this position. With that, you can roll some guys in there this fall. But the spring, you're still going up against Isaiah Smith, Turbo. You're going up against Trey Wilson. You're going up against Billy Walton, who looks great. You're going up against DJ Warner, who's a former top 100 guy. You're going up against Cam Robertson. David Abiar is a tough out when he's playing at a high level. You have a lot of players that can absolutely go at this defensive end position. So they're not Abdul Carter, don't get me wrong, but they're guys that, give you a good test, give a good battle and all those things. And SMU needs to find out a lot about what they have at the offensive tackle position. I mean, that's my big question for the spring. I think if you find out, certain things about your offensive tackle position, you could throw one of those players inside. You can say, all right, we tried this, we're done. We're going to move you inside and create a little bit more competition there. And SMU could go after more offensive linemen in the transfer portal after the spring window. I mean, or during the spring window. That's the the truth. I mean, they can totally assess all these positions and say, you know what, we're gonna go after some more. And I think that's worth mentioning. That's the thing about the transfer portals. You can always do that. The thing I want to watch very closely, and is something that we're going to watch it on the Pony Express in particular, like these big spring questions, they're going to be kept in the back of our minds when we write your notebooks, when we write all your coverage, because they are the questions that, I would think most of you are asking too. So the offense tackle position is my biggest. It's not a question mark because they were able to run the football well. They brought some physicality. You can see there is talent there. It got exposed a little bit against teams like Clemson, teams like Penn State, but a lot of teams are going to get exposed like that. So what SMU needs to find is if they can take it to that next level, because if they give Kevin Jennings a little bit more time, if they create better running lanes for a position that doesn't have a player that is flying up draft boards, then you've got to be better in certain positions. And that's why they're looking closely at the offensive tackle position. And that's why SMU has a chance to really take a look, take stock, and maybe find out what they've got at offense tackle and go from there. My biggest question for the defensive line, I start with the defensive tackles. And how do those defense tackles look that transferred in? Because, man, talk about an incredible job by the coaching staff to get, players like Jeffrey Embody in, to get Terry Webb in, to get, DeMarjay Lewis in, and to get a lot of these new faces that SMU has brought in from the transfer portal, get them into the program and say, okay, let's go to work, Eric Taylor. Let's revitalize your career. And this is where Jonathan Jefferson now can be that leader, can be that player that steps up for SMU and show people how to do it. And then you've got Blake Burris, you've got Mike Johan, Sanjo Achiki back. You've got Kevin Allen who could take a step forward. You have some returning talent. You have a lot of competition in this group. Jonathan Jefferson, I assume, is going to be one of the starters. And then from there, do you see it work out early? Because look, DeMarjay Lewis has been hurt. Terry Webb is coming up from G5. Eric Taylor hasn't played in basically over a year. One of the players that is most proven in a sense is Jeffrey Embody. You need to see him put it together. So those are the big questions, is when you look along the interior, when you look at the guys battling a Logan Parr, when you look at them battling an SEC starter in Addison Nichols, who I think is just going to be tremendous for SMU, what do you see? Do you see what I saw last spring and in fall camp, which is, man, it's going to be tough sledding on this group. It's going to be really tough to run the football on some of these defensive linemen. You saw it right away that SMU maybe needed another piece, which they ended up getting in Jared Harrison Hunt. But you saw Tank Booker. You saw Jonathan Jefferson. You saw Mike Lockhart and some of these guys, Corey Roberson. And you saw what they did, and you said, man, this is going to be one of the better run-stopping teams in college football. And they were. Do we see that again against a team that doesn't have a Brashard Smith back there? And if they do and they show it, then great. I mean, that's awesome. And I still think they would love to, if the right guy rolls in, maybe get a little younger at that position too. It's a position that's hard to recruit out of the high school ranks. So maybe they add a DJ Warner type into that mix and say, hey, we're going to develop you. We're going to get you going. All those things, come home. Or, find somebody who can, help out from a depth perspective. And if that's the case, then, we're going to be sitting here, wondering, okay, what do they think they have? Who's the next Jared Harrison Hunt? Who's the next Tank Booker? There's some big bodies. There's some really good looking bodies on that defensive line that they brought in, but they got to show it. We got to see it. We got to see them work with Grizz, see what their bodies look like, and then see how they hold the point of attack in particular to see if they shut down that run. Because if they shut down that run, then they can rush the passer. So there are some defense tackles that they brought in that are very good on paper. they've got to stay healthy. They've got to bring it. And if they do, we're going to see, another strong defense out of SMU. But assessing those defensive tackles, getting a feel for how they play, how they move, how they hold the point of attack is so critical to assessing this defensive line in the long-term future. But I do want to say the defensive end position is who ends up being that reliable Jafari Harvey, Elijah Roberts type. Because, look, I would argue that Elijah Roberts is the hardest guy to replace on this entire team. You can make an argument for Rashard Smith. You can make an argument for maybe even Jonathan McGill, Kobe Wilson, maybe. But they're kind of like not stuck, but stuck in their positions. CJ Sanders is a good one, but you have a positional player that played out on the edge, played inside, moved him around, was a total matchup problem, led the nation or was right up there in pressures. And he was playing limited snaps in a sense, with Cam Roberts and their guys. But if you find somebody like a Cam Robertson who takes his game to the next level, that's huge. That is absolutely massive. And if that happens under Sam Dunham, look out. That is a guy who has really flashed very well for the amount of snaps he's played over the last year or so. He looks the part. Billy Walton looks the part. Isaiah Smith, we know Turbo can play. That next level is what you want to see out of these players. And it needs to happen. It absolutely needs to happen. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that edge position to see how things go there. Now, before we get into the linebackers, I do want to remind you guys we're also presented by our friends at Status Jet. Talked to David Henry this week. We had a great meeting, really excited about what we're going to do next here. And working with Status Jet, make sure you mention on the Pony Express for that discount on a round-trip flight. They'll be able to take you to the next level in terms of your travel experience. But look, we want to make it happen. We want to make the Clemson game happen. So if you're on theponyexpress.com, chime in. If you'd be interested in going in and out of Clemson the day of the game, it would be flight, it would be a bus, and it would be tickets. So, and of course, we'll feed you guys and all that. It will be a flat fee. You'll be there that morning or whenever kind of, the appropriate time to take off is, depending on what time the game is. And then you'll be back in Dallas in bed whenever it is, either late Saturday, early Sunday morning. So we are getting that planning going. So we want to make it happen. We've kind of worked through some things that we can do to make it happen. So that is our kind of our big goal. So really excited about what we're doing with Status Jet. Now, when you look at the linebacker position, this is one that's going to be really interesting with Alex Kilgore returning as he'll be a starter. And then you've signed Zakai Barker, but you also have a really talented group of linebackers in a sense. They're young, they're inexperienced. Don't get me wrong, but who pushes Zakai Barker, the East Carolina transfer? Is it Justin Medlock? Is it Brandon Maiazono? Is it Brandon Booker? Can Kyle Firm make some things happen at linebacker? Can Zach Smith emerge after redshirting? And then you have Mark Villasana on campus as a true freshman early enrollee. But the reality is you have Zakai Barker, who absolutely has to be a day one contributor here. And look, we know the model. We know Kobe Wilson. We know Ahmad Walker. We know these undersized linebackers that, truthfully, Scott Simons, Maurice Crum, they really like. They've gotten a lot out of them. Alex Kilgore is the best pro prospect that's been in this room the last 2 years. Now is his time to take it to the next level. And we know that his commitment to working hard, his knowledge of the game, how he plays, I think he can do that. I'm more concerned with what SMU is going to get out of the linebacker position next to him. Because, you went into last year and you went into 23 as well with Ahmad Walker coming in, being this consistent starter, veteran guy that, knew Scott Simon's defense. And then you had Kobe Wilson emerge, and he was awesome. You knew what you kind of had in Alex Kilgore as a true freshman, what it was going to be. And then next year they kind of rotated all three, but Kobe Wilson emerged as a star. He emerged as one of the best players, maybe top 5 player on the team, top 3 maybe. Truthfully. You have Brashard Smith, Kevin Jennings, Elijah Roberts. You have some other great players. But, man, was Kobe Wilson not awesome last year? And if you have that, great in Zakai Barker. That was something, though, that we learned in the fall. But I really want to watch the competition next to Alex Kilgore. And there are others that are going to challenge Alex and do all those things. But they need somebody to assert themselves quickly in that position, or else you're going to end up seeing it maybe be somebody that maybe be a position that they target in the transfer portal. All right, cornerback. This one's fairly simple for me, and the reason why it is look, Jalen Davis-Robinson is somebody that I've wanted for a long time to see him step up, and he's battled some a hammy here and there. He missed a lot of spring last year with that and an injury. And AJ Davis is, he had that absolute scare in one of the games this year. And you have guys that are veterans that kind of know what they're doing there. And then you bring in Marcellus Barnes from Syracuse, who I was talking with one non-SMU person, a national analyst, and boy, there are some people that are incredibly high on Marcellus Barnes and what he can bring to the table. So look out for Marcellus. And then you have Alex Rogers and Speedy Nettles, who are back, can be some players. Javion Holiday enrolled early. But, man, doesn't Deuce Harmon have to be your best corner? I mean, does he – look, SMU ends up adding Marcellus Barnes, who they absolutely loved from the get-go when he entered the portal. It kind of took a minute to materialize. But Deuce Harmon has to be your best corner leaving spring. And we saw, I think, him come on later in the year. I know corner's a tough position, guys. I mean, it really is. I mean, you see when you have to play a lot of snaps, when you're tired, and the vertical threats that these outside corners face pretty much down in, down out. Like, look, if they're running the ball, they're trying to run off the corners, for the most part. Or if they're, throwing the ball, you're seeing an outside deep route. I mean, it's tiring chasing guys. And so you saw some times where I think SMU didn't have the right amount of depth in a sense at that position, which is why they moved Brandon Crossley out there to begin with. And they kind of missed that. And Deuce Harmon kind of wore some of that, especially early in the season, against some good receivers too. I mean, Jack Bash, he was a good receiver. They played some gazelles against Louisville. They really, and then, FSU physically imposing. I thought Deuce Harmon really got better as the season went on. This spring, this is money year. This is last year. He's got to be the best player. So does he become the best corner in that room is what I want to know. That's my big question at the corners. Safety, another position that you should feel pretty strongly about. You have Ahmad Moses coming back. You have Isaiah Wokobio coming back. You have players like Jaden Milner-Jones, Kyron Shabers, Abdul Muhammad, Jalen Moses. You have early enrollees like Tyron Polley, Lamadrick Spencer. This is a really strong group. And Scott Simons has done a really nice job building it up. My question is, who plays nickel? What does that look like? Because you have Lamadrick Spencer. You have Ahmad Moses, I think, could get some time there. You have Abdul Muhammad, who's played there. You have Jalen Moses, who I think could play there. Just Jaden Milner-Jones get some time there. What happens at the nickel position? I don't think people understand that you're replacing CJ Sanders, who took a multi-year starter for SMU and in 23 played well enough where they're like, all right, let's redshirt Brandon Crossley. CJ Sanders is a boss. And then 24, basically CJ Sanders played the nickel position just the entire time. That was it. That was who played it, and he was that good. And I love to see the snap counts. I need to go back in my PFF and look. I mean, CJ Sanders probably played among the most snaps, if not the most snaps in the secondary for SMU last season. So who is the replacement there? Is it Lamadrick Spencer, who they feel really strongly about? Is it somebody who comes this summer? It could be, maybe. Do they add another piece there? We talked about Rocket Rahimi on the live pod earlier this week. Who steps up there? Who makes it happen? That is something that it is the hardest position to play in college football, is that nickel spot. It's really, really difficult. Really difficult. And if you're SMU, you need to find a way to, make it happen. And that's the part about, this job for these coaches is each year you get positions you got to fill. So I want to really watch the nickel spot, see who's playing there, see who's developing, see who's making plays. That's a huge piece of the safety room for me because you have in Ahmad Moses and Isaiah Wachovia, two absolute studs, make plays all the time. So really going to be watching them closely as we get into spring ball. It's going to be a lot of fun, though. Look, I do want to take the last couple minutes and just talk about spring ball a little bit. It's a difficult situation to see, where spring ball is headed, where we're seeing this game go in terms of spring games. And now, you can talk about, the spring game for SMU has not necessarily been something that really looks to be, a high level thing. I mean, it's basically a scrimmage and then a running clock in the second half, and they draft their teams and have the players, former players come back and pick up the coaching headsets and coach them up and things like that. And it's a fun deal. But man, if I'm SMU, you don't need a spring game. Just have another strong practice and go from there to then put together a nice fan day. And I mean, I'm talking about, putting the players in the indoor after practice, so like, look, you can do something in the stadium. You can do a scrimmage, you can do a good practice. Hey, come watch practice for a little bit. We're gonna get some work done. We're gonna do a scrimmage period. It's gonna be 30 minutes. It's gonna be maybe 45 minutes. And then guess what? We're gonna have every player at a table in the indoor, and you can get a poster signed, get your picture with them. Shoot, I mean, I'm sure the Boulevard Collective or whatever Pony Sports could do something in terms of, making it about, NIL or something like that, like scan the code, shout out the players, whatever. And, there's an opportunity to get a little bit more out of that as far as, building just community and things like that. So I don't think you need a spring game anymore. What I'm more about in the spring is getting some serious work done, limited practices, obviously, but just going as hard as you can for about an hour on the field, just get it done and find ways to develop your roster and keep people healthy, of course. But the other cool opportunity about the spring and why I think it's great that Rhett Lashley lets us in all practice during spring, or at least he has in the past, I expect that to continue, is it's a good way to just kind of build a good rapport with, okay, this roster is X, this player is X, this position group is X, Y, Z, and we get a good understanding for that. I think the spring is a good opportunity to get fan engagement up a little bit. You don't need a spring game for that. And SMU is just not a place where a spring game is going to be anything more than, the diehards and a few others coming together on a Saturday evening, Friday night. I think they did it, and getting together and having it all, just kind of lay it all out there for an hour or whatever. It's not going to be a great environment either. I mean, it was at Highlander Stadium last year, which actually wasn't bad, all things considered. But at Ford, with it being as empty as it is, I mean, it's just not a cool thing to do, I guess. I mean, I'd rather just see them scrimmage and then do a bunch of fan engagement, and maybe you do something where it's a ticketed barbecue event. I don't know, run it to the Mustang Club, raise some money for NIL and rev share and all those things. So it is interesting to see, though, the tampering piece of it, which I'll add this caveat to all of that. If you're college football, ditch the spring, have one portal window at the end of April. Guys can enter for 10 days. They can think about it. It doesn't need to be longer than that. 10-day window to enter. Okay. And then they can get recruited in May. And then in June, you can do OTAs. Done. Just have the guys work out or throw 7-on-7 by themselves. We don't need spring ball anymore. What we need is one portal window. That's what needs to happen. Because that'll totally change the coaching calendar too. You'll see coaches coach out their seasons. You'll see schools wait to fire coaches. There will be a Black Monday in college football in a sense, like there is in the NFL. They got to fix the calendar. It's a continued thing that needs to happen, but probably for another day. So hope you guys enjoy this Friday, hour-long podcast. Hopefully it gets you through your weekend, whether you're running errands or finding some place to watch SMU at Stanford, 4 p.m. Central. So be sure to keep it locked on the Pony Express for all your latest SMU football, basketball recruiting need. We'll be back next week. Hayden Howerton, we're getting back at it. We're going to start previewing position by position the spring and looking back on them and talking about how the 2024 season went. So about that time, by the time we see you next, it'll be March, and that means spring football is on the horizon for SMU. So hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Catch you guys next time. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to OnThePonyExpress.com for more coverage.